Hey everybody, Tony D. Just got done mowing the lawn. But I had a bit of an epiphany while I was out there mowing away. I was thinking about the comics gators and comic books and the whole situation. Sorry to get into comics again, but it's an endlessly fascinating subject to me. And for those of you who don't know, let me bring you up to speed just briefly. The comics gators are basically the conservatives of the comic book world, the SJWs of comics, which makes up the vast majority of the comic book talent, are made up of virtue signals, very similar to what you see in the entertainment industry in general. You see mostly SJW sort of virtue signaling people who pretend to be woke and wonderful, and even if they're not necessarily, and a very tiny handful of conservatives that generally stay under the radar. In the case of the comic gators, there was really no reason for them to stay under the radar. They kind of weren't in the well. Ethan Van Sciver, of course, was in the comic book industry, but you had these guys who, they just had a different political opinion. And you had these SJWs that were just so hot to call anybody the word for a German soldier in World War II, which I can't say because of YouTube, which is also run by SJWs. You think they'd ban the other thing. Anyhow, they, and I got caught up in that too, trying to negotiate as ham-fisted as I did, trying to offer up a comic book peace summit. But it occurred to me, here's Joan, it occurred to me that maybe this is a little bit beyond political, because I was thinking about it, and the SJWs in this conflict, and not everybody is an SJW who's not in the Comicsgate, but I'm not in Comicsgate, and I'm not an SJW, not anymore. I was back in the day, but people. I think there are a lot of virtue signalers out there. And this is backed up by some amount of research, that they tend to be weak in one way or another. They have issues, and certainly I did back in the day during that time when I was coming up in college and trying to make my way creatively. It was a bit of a struggle, and I think that some of that weakness has also filtered down to the weakness in terms of talent, in terms of, not really talent, I shouldn't say talent, in terms of their creative choices, right? So creatively, one can make choices that are hard, and do things that are a little out there on the edge and possibly risk your job. And even if you're just doing client work, you suggest something to your client that you think is a really good idea, but maybe they're not totally on board with it, but you kind of got to lobby for it, kind of thing, which I've done on many occasions. And it's a risk. It's a risk. But a more weak, let's say, creative tends not to do that, because they want to go along to get along. They want to be popular, much like the SJWs who virtue signal. That's part of their whole mindset, is to be liked. Without that, why would they even bother to virtue signal? If you didn't want to be liked, you wouldn't bother to virtue signal about, the latest terrorism case and how you pray for the victims and that kind of nonsense on Facebook. And it is nonsense because, it's just Facebook. You're not really doing anything. If you feel that strongly, first off, there's no reason to announce it to the world. And secondly, you can do something. You can donate to a charity. You can, fly to where the terrorists are, operating, and lend your expertise to them. Join the army, whatever you feel, would best help fight terrorism in the world. Become a scholar and, talk people out of terrorism. I don't know. I'm not a terrorism expert. I know some about it, but I'm not an expert. So I think part of this battle, and this is more of a clarification. It's not to take anything away from the battle of the woke, which sign me up on the anti-woke side to see my videos if you haven't. I've certainly chastised Hollywood for it. I think it is also to a certain extent the mentally strong versus the mentally weak. Because the mentally weak people can be talented. They can be very talented, but if they fall into bad habits, and you can fall into bad habits in, physically, emotionally, financially. There are all kinds of ways you can fall into bad habits. There is, I think, an intellectual laziness about a lot of the SJWs that, more so today than back when I was an SJW. At least back when I was an SJW, kind of had to work at it a little bit. These days, since it's so trendy and popular to be so woke and wonderful, and since you have the internet, the information is kind of at your fingertips. And but even that betrays the weakness, usually on the SJW side. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some weak people on the anti-woke side too. Some of these people are just ahead of the curve. They've gotten on board the right train at the right time in history, and mark my words, the opposite will be true in I don't know, like 20 years, I guess, when the anti-woke and the Republicans have been in power for like 2 decades, and now they've gone too far. It's the pattern of the world. The pendulum swings back and forth. It won't swing as far as it once did, but you'll see some of it. And the things we're experiencing now in terms of the SJW weakness will be brought up as if it's happening 20 years in the future, even though most of it will be gone, just like the SJWs today are bringing stuff up from 30, 40, 50 years ago as if it just happened. The German soldiers from World War II, various infamous groups that are associated with the extreme right, which, in my view, this whole left-right dynamic is part of the problem politically, because there are people who analyze the German soldiers of World War II and note that their leader was on sort of both sides of the political spectrum in his own weird way. And at the end of the day, I think left and right is not a comprehensive enough spectrum, and even the Overton window, or that test you take where you find out where you are on the graph. That these are all simplifications of very complicated views, in human beings, because human beings are so complicated. They're so just so the older you get, you just meet such strange people who have cobbled together views and a life that, wow, you never even thought possible. Like, these people exist. This is what you do. This is how you live. This is how you think. That's crazy. And so it's not as simple as left, right, SJW, Comicsgate. It's very, very complicated. Many, many, many nuances in between. And beyond, outside of that. I consider myself kind of outside of that because I'm a libertarian. I look at it, I kind of, see the Comicsgaters and go, wow, you guys have a lot of points. But then, I see the SJWs, who I was part of for many years, and I think to myself, well, just a few decades ago, I would have been totally on their side. But I also realized that back then I wasn't as informed as I am now. So I think what we're going to see down the road with this is that the one of the reasons the Comicsgaters are strong and the SJWs are weak is it's an evolution in terms of numbers. The Comicsgaters their herd has been culled and brought under fire. So it's made them strong intellectually, they've been forced to kick up their game. Some of them have fallen by the wayside and, fallen on hard times. But, most who come through it stronger and more seasoned and ready to battle. Whereas the SJWs are legion now, and they are weak because they're so collective, because they can easily hide behind each other. It's kind of why the Antifa guys, when they fight very cowardly. They get in a big crowd and they surround you, and then the guy behind you hits you, and then when you turn around, another guy hits you from another side, and you can't fight fairly with these guys because they are at heart cowards. And that ties into the mob mentality, but it also ties into what attracts a mob. And I think it is a weakness both intellectually and physically, because you see the soy boys, as they call them. And again, I got to mention Daniel Kibblesmith. He could be the poster boy for a soy boy, in my opinion, because he's balding, he's got glasses, he seems very timid, and and he's just at his ideas are very woke, and it all seems like he's being pushed around by some ladies in the editorial room. That's just my speculation, pure speculation. I have no inside knowledge. I'm not saying that's true, but that's kind of what it feels like to me. So yeah, this may be the subtext of the battle between the Comicsgaters and the SJWs, may be the strong versus the weak. And in the end, I think the strong will survive and thrive, and they will attract more minions, as it were. And then over time, the minions will become so legion, it will attract the weak in society, because they are afraid of sticking with the SJWs, who now don't have the numbers, and therefore don't have the perceived security. So they flood basically the Comicsgater side, until weakening it to the point where the excesses become then known. And meanwhile, the SJWs are still getting attacked, also getting attacked by the weak people, and they get stronger. So that is how I see sort of the dynamic of the pattern working under its current situation. But that's unlikely to change anytime soon, until something new happens, like maybe aliens will land and people will be very afraid of them, and then this might be 30, 40, 50 years in the future, and then the SJWs take up their cause because they're really wonderful, harmless aliens who want to save us. And by this time, the people like the Comicsgaters have been in power too long, and they're drowning in their excesses, and then it all changes again. But anyhow, that's just a little mental theory I wanted to throw out there.